the people that are going to excel are the engineers who have a team leader, tech leader mindset.
Welcome to Children, Tech meets the world, where CTOs share the tales and the comments. So start a few big names, innovations unfold. How many CTOs will share their stories untold?
Welcome back, everybody. We know you've been waiting for another episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take? And in this occasion, this instance, my name is Scott Porad, and this is my trusty co host.
Brad Hefta-Gaub.
But the question today is not how many CTOs does it take? The question is how many tokens does it take?
How many tokens does it take?
Brad, we were just chatting before we got recording here, and I said we should be recording this.
Yes, we should be.
You got your cursor wrapped.
My year in
I got a
review cursor.
Spotify wrapped. You got a cursor wrapped.
Yeah.
My Spotify wrap says my Spotify age is 32. Did you get a
I
Spotify
didn't
age?
get no. I don't use Spotify. My Spotify account is like the family account, so it's like random stuff that my wife and kids listen to. So
The sad thing about having your Spotify age be 32 when you're my age is at first you think, oh, that's cool. I'm listening to music 20 years younger than my age. And then you think, wait a second, 32 isn't young.
you're a millennial. Your music tastes are millennial. Oh man, that's funny.
Well, tell me about your cursor wrapped.
Well, I was not necessarily proud of this. I was kind of like, wow, that seems like a smaller number than I was expecting. But then I shared it with some of the devs that I work with, and they were all like, what the hell? Anyway, 2.9 billion tokens in 2025. That's what I personally used within Cursor alone. 2.9 billion tokens.
What is the cost of a token?
Ah, that's a great question. And I'm an early enough adopter of Cursor that I'm on the legacy plan. Not gonna call it the grandfathered plan. I'm on the legacy plan. And so I'm only paying 20 bucks a month. And like everyone else has to pay per token, but I'm like grandfathered in, or excuse me, legacied in.
I wonder what the actual cost of a token is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably $10.
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But these companies are spending so much money. I read
No.
today that Microsoft spent $88 billion on AI last year.
Well, that sounds about right. But then that means that my 2.9 billion tokens are not nearly that much, They spent a lot more than that.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, that's cool.
So yeah, so I think there's a little, it's funny because I feel like even some of my top developers, so like one of the top developers I work with after I posted my 2.9 billion, he was like, he responded saying, oh no, I need to up my level because he'd only had 700 million tokens. So he was a little bit like, wow, like, what's the math
Well,
on that? Four
I
times more
mean,
than him?
this is an interesting thing because there's a lot of different ways one can interpret token usage. It's kind of like clocks.
Uh, yeah, maybe. Maybe. It's a little bit like clocks. I mean, I would tend to agree that like as you and I love to talk about engineering efficiency and every time we talk about what's the right metric, I always love to say it's clocks, of course, right? Because it's the worst measurement ever. So I wouldn't be I think it's a legitimate to say like what did you do with those tokens, Brad? Right? Like were there, it's not a bad case to make that a throwing around token numbers is a little bit like throwing around lines of code. So I think that's a fair point. Um, I would say that like and we kind of hinted at this in our last episode of 2025. Like, where do we think? What my opinion about where I think AI coding is going in 2026, and what I don't want to turn this into. It's not a predictions. I don't want to say a predictions episode or anything like that, but I think that we're going to see a dramatic, um, a K-shaped not a K-shaped economy, but like a K-shaped reaction to AI coding tools, right? The haves are going to grow faster, and the have-nots are going to fall further behind faster. Um, and I think it's going to come down to that central question of what you're scratching at, which is it doesn't matter how many tokens you used; it matters how effectively you used the tokens that you used.
Hmm. I agree. And it might actually be an effective jumping off point for something that might actually be useful and practical to the 39 people who listen to this show, which is, what are the things that the effective people are doing or are going to do that will make them continue to be effective or more effective? And I have one thing in my list. I'm curious to know, you are much more of the power user here than I am. So I'm curious to know what you think those things are.
You want to share your item that you think is the leading indicator of this, or the
I see two. Well, actually, I said one thing, but I actually think it's two things. The first is engineers are going to continue to figure out how to take large tasks and break them into smaller tasks that the agents can do one by one. And I will come back to this like 50 times in the next year. There was just this thing that Kent Beck, it didn't just happen. He put it on, probably LinkedIn is where I saw it, where he said, 90% of my skills are becoming obsolete, but the remaining 10% are 10,000 times more valuable.
Yep.
And knowing how to break the work down to describe each step to the agent is one of those skills, which
100% agree.
jibes with something I've said many times on this podcast, I'm sure, which is the advice I always give to engineers about developing their career is, get to the point where you can write an implementation plan or tech spec or whatever you want to call it, so that other people can understand your design and start collaborating with you on it, is to me the most important skill to develop, because then you're at a crossroads in your career. You can decide if you want to be a manager or if you want to stick with being an IC. But until you can actually take requirements and translate them into work for someone to do, that's where you got to get to. So that fits with one of the things I'm seeing is being able to break that work down. The other thing I'm seeing is AI is accelerating things. It's not making it free.
Here.
And what do I mean by that? I'll give you two examples, a few examples. I'll start with one. I've probably talked about this in the podcast before because it came from earlier this year. An engineer who updated a lot of code, and it saved him tons of time. But he said it took him like 4 or 5 hours to get the prompt right,
Yeah.
of experimentation, and then it saved him probably weeks of time.
Yeah.
We had another case that came through recently. An engineer, they had about a little less than 2,000 tests, and these tests were flaky and low quality for a variety of reasons. And I mean, he spent an afternoon. It was 4 or 5 hours. He spent an afternoon setting up a process, a set of steps for the agent to go through. First, by getting some third-party criteria for what a good test looked like, then evaluating each test and giving it a letter grade, then asking the robot to go through and doing a bunch of steps, and ultimately having it refactor some of the things at the bottom, or not at the bottom, at the end. Again, multi-step process, learning how to take these big tasks, and it took him a bunch of time.
Yeah.
And then an engineer I just talked to recently, I thought this was really interesting. He created an entire GitHub repo, which consisted of mostly MD files,
Mm-hmm.
just context.
Yep. Yep. This is a huge. By the way, you talked about the notion of like what are best practices, and so for sure, great documentation in an MD file in your directory trees, that is gold for the agents. They need that. Give them more of that.
They needed, this was not even really in the directory tree of the code. It was separate. He was trying to get, he is trying to get, I'm just looking for it here. I looked at it earlier today. He was trying to get the robot to containerize something that's currently running on bare metal, like
Uh-huh.
an older application. And he set up a number of, and let me just tell you what these files are. He's got AI agent and quick start
Yep.
MD, implementation plan summary MD,
Yep.
containerization implementation plan MD,
Yep.
implementation plan checklist, containerization goals MD,
Yep.
migration guide MD, previous containerization attempts MD, lesson, which is lessons learned from previous attempts,
Yep.
relevant Confluence pages MD,
Yep.
GitHub other repositories. So
Yep.
like, and then just all just pages,
Okay.
pages, just describing all this context and what to do. He's been working on this for like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. So here's my I'm gonna just come right out and say the magic words that matter for all of this. And I already said K-shape, K-shaped economy when it comes to dealing with AI coding agents. The haves are gonna excel, the have-nots are gonna fail faster and faster. And it all comes down to not only what you said about the concept of being able to really break down work, but I believe it's all about being a tech lead or an engineering manager. The people that are going to excel are the engineers who have a team leader, tech leader mindset. But
Hmm.
instead of leading other developers, they're leading the robots. And
Hmm.
so that's the money shot. That's the thing that matters the most is and so I will say I think the reason that I'm going to make the case that my 2.9 billion tokens are incredibly effective tokens because I was operating at a, you know, tech lead, engineering manager, architect level with the robots for those 2.9 billion tokens. So imagine that was effectively, you know, 300 junior engineers that I had working for me, and I managed them like junior engineers.
Yeah, one of the people on our team said you have to think about the agents as really eager interns.
Yeah, and so what does that mean? So let's kind of go to the next level, right? So one, it means being really good at describing the problem space, right? Like you said, and I agree with you that like being able to break down the problem, explain the problem, capture the statement of the problem. That's what your engineer that's created all these MD files for this containerization project, that's what they've done, right? Now, that's only the start though, because if I just do that, but I am not good at evaluating progress and output, right? The
Hmm.
other thing that a tech lead or an engineering manager does is they have an understanding of what right-sized progress looks like and what right-sized output looks like,
Hmm.
right? So they can evaluate the technical output to say this is correct or this is not correct. But more importantly, or equally importantly, they're able to evaluate the progress against the goal as it's happening
Hmm.
and course correct, right? So what's the classic story of the really good engineering managers you've worked with in your career? They're the ones that get compelling results out of all of their engineers. And they're never coming to you saying like, "Oh yeah, this engineer, please get them off my team. They suck. They can't do their job." Right? You don't ever hear that from the really good engineering managers, right? They're in there figuring out how to make even the worst performers perform well. And the reason they're able to do that is because they know what they know not only what good results look like, but they know what it looks like when the engineer is struggling.
Hmm.
And the AI bots struggle and they continue to struggle and they're going to continue to struggle.
Hmm.
They're getting better, but they struggle. And so this is why I think there's going to be a K-shaped reaction to um, more and more use of AI agents. And this is why measuring the number of tokens is a dangerous thing.
Hmm.
You'll burn through a bunch of tokens in a world where you let the bots go off the rails. You're not good at evaluating their progress,
Hmm.
and they churn out slop, right? We all hear the term
Hmm.
AI slop, right? And so whenever I see somebody on LinkedIn or on Twitter basically saying, AI coding sucks, it just generates slop, my response to that is, I bet that person would be a horrible engineering manager. Like
Hmm.
they only know how to evaluate their own work. They don't know how to evaluate other engineers' work.
Yeah, well, there's two parts there. It's not just evaluating the work. I think I think the words I want to use just say evaluate the process. And what I mean by that is like, as an engineering manager, if I had an engineer who, went for a couple of days, the easiest way to describe this would be if their ticket stayed in the same column on the
Yep.
board for a couple of days, it's like a sign, actually not even a couple of days, a day or two, two stand-ups in a row and like that ticket's still there. It's like, okay, that person's stuck. Something's wrong.
Yep.
Actually, I don't know what's wrong. Something's wrong, right?
Yep.
Um, and so it's not whether the work product that person was creating was good or not, but they're actual like they weren't making any progress.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is, what I'm saying is that is a 100% happening with all of the AI coding agents.
Yeah.
And if you let them get over their skis, then and you don't course correct quickly, then they're burning tokens, they're wasting their time, they're wasting time, they're burning tokens, and they're wasting your time, and they're increasing the likelihood that they're going to produce slop.
Okay, I have a question for you, something I have never tried or never even thought to have tried until now. If you have an engineer who's struggling with something, you say to them, you sit down with them, you talk through the problem, you give them a point in the right direction. You say, work on this. You say, let's check in after lunch, right?
Yep.
See how it's going. Can I say to an agent, like, pick a time frame, 15 minutes, 30
Yep.
minutes, hey, do this thing and report back to me. If you're not done in 30 minutes, just stop
Yeah.
and let's discuss.
Yeah. So, my quick answer to that is, um, the tooling has been changing and evolving in such a way that, the I would argue that the development tool set companies, Cursor being,
Mhm,
a good example of this, um, they have recognized this challenge that you and I've talked about, which is that the agents can get off the rails if you give them too big of a task. And so they've been changing their tooling to essentially add those checkpoints. And you might
mhm,
recall, like, and if you go back into our old episodes, you might remember that I've said things like early on, like, 9 months ago, the first prompt that I would always give, I would say, do not write any code until you've told me your plan. Like, I had to
mhm, mhm.
explicitly say that to the agents. And now Cursor has plan mode. So
And,
you use plan mode instead. And so that's one of the examples of the guardrails that the tooling, companies have put in to effectively give you that functionality that you're talking about. Like, hey, give me your thought, give me your implementation plan, check in with me before you move on. It's not necessary. I've not yet seen, Cursor implement anything where the, agent stops when it gets stuck and says, "Hey, I'm stuck." I would not be surprised if that doesn't show up soon, because I'm confident that all of us are running into it. But as a simple example of this, I literally am currently in the midst of burning some tokens on trying to, solve this obscure like Safari bug, where it's
mhm,
like Safari's use of audio and video is is bad. It's quite bad, and, so there's some bug I'm trying to solve that has to do with, default Mac default audio device in Safari. Person unplugs their AirPods and it goes crazy, right? And I've been working on this for a couple days, which effectively means I'm burning millions of tokens on it. And, the agent keeps coming back to solutions that I have already tried and it failed.
mhm,
And it
mhm,
keeps circling back, right? And so this is a good example where I fundamentally feel that if you're a developer who's not who would struggle at this themselves, then you're going to be completely perplexed and you're going to be completely stymied by the agent running off and getting stuck. Like if you don't know how to unstuck yourself, right? Then you're not going to know how to unstuck the agent, right?
mhm. Yeah,
Um, uh,
yeah.
so the basic answer is yes, you can certainly include in your prompts, hey, come back to me. Another thing that you can do, depending on the tools that you're using, like, all of the tools nowadays are kind of showing their thought process. So if you're
Mhm,
paying attention and you're watching the agent work, if you're sitting back and watching the agent work, you can see it doing, thinking about what it's going to say next or try next, and they all have a stop button, and if
mhm.
you're watching, and it's basically going to start spinning off to do the same thing. you got to hit that stop button and say, and it's exactly what you would do with a junior engineer, right? You're checking in at stand up and you're like, hey, you haven't made any progress on the ticket. Talk to me. What's going on? How are you, what are you trying today? You know?
Mhm.
And if they're basically telling you something that they talked about yesterday, you're like, that didn't work yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's take this out of stand up and let's go do a one-on-one real quick. And we're going to try to figure out why you're stuck on this.
Okay, so to just recap and reset here a little bit. You're foreseeing K-shape.
Yes.
For the upper branch of the K, I said breaking down tasks and paying attention to progress. You sort of encapsulated that into saying you sort of tech lead or engineering manager skills.
Yes.
What else do you think the people who are on the upper branch of the K are doing?
Well, those two levers are pretty important, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
pretty important.
If all they're doing is that, then they're probably pretty good.
Yeah, I do think that, and we talked a little bit about this a couple episodes ago in the Door report. I do think that there are very real environmental attributes that make a difference. So, um, kind of the code. Do you have already good processes for code reviews? Do you already have good
Hmm.
processes for change management, CI/CD? I personally believe that I'm a big, strong believer. I'm a strong believer in um, linting, type checking,
Hmm.
um, uh, quality test harnesses, right? And so if you've got those things in place, right, then you can be a little bit more free to let the agents run
Hmm.
and because they can't do damage, right? Because you have other guardrails in place to make sure that they don't do damage.
Hmm.
Um, so I feel like that's another important point to make that how many times have you gone into an organization, right? As a fractional CTO, you show up and you find out that like they don't have they don't even have like high quality version control best
Hmm.
practices, or they don't have,
Oh,
unit test best practices, or they don't have, linters or things like that.
it's been a long time since I've seen no version control.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of different versions of weak version control, right?
It's
Like your
true.
your branching strategy can be, yeah, I got it under version control, but literally it's just like when we commit it like put, we don't know what we release. We're saving it all in version control, but we have no tagging to know what we've released or something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay, here's another thought for the top of the K. I think a certain swashbuckler vibe.
YOLO?
I guess YOLO, maybe I'm not exactly sure. But there's a certain element where you have to not be afraid of failing
Agreed.
because I'm sure, I would imagine for every 10 things you try to do with your junior intern robot, some percentage of them, five of the 10 don't succeed very well. Something like that. I don't know.
Throw them out.
Throw them out, of course. So it's a different attitude as an engineer.
Oh, totally. Like I think that again, like so let me just play that back to you because I think I agree with you very much that um if you have a strong competency in evaluating correctness and
Mhm.
evaluating progress, and you combine that with a willingness to, the bots aren't going to complain that you gave them a bunch of tasks that you then just close their PR without merging. They're not going to get
Right.
all sad because you didn't merge their PR, right? So if you're basically willing to give the bots tons of work to do and you have the ability to evaluate that. So like literally I just heard this interview with the CEO of Cursor, not just, but maybe it was a couple months ago, but he was basically talking about like they realized that the job of the engineer has moved into it's all about code review, right? So
Hmm.
like, when was the last time we looked at what a code review really looks like these days? And it's like we all
Hmm.
think of the GitHub green lines, red lines, split view, unified view. But have really stepped back and asked the question, what's the easiest way to evaluate and adjudicate quality code? And so they're doing some cool innovation in that space because they recognize that like how it's all about evaluation of evaluating the quality of the output, right? That's a huge piece of this. Um,
That CEO of Cursor may said that, but I feel like I said that first.
I mean, it's not a, it's, I'm just gonna say it's a pretty straightforward idea.
Here's a question. It's a little bit of a change of topic, but it was already hard enough to be a good software engineer. Is this actually making it this, when I say this, I mean, is AI or AI assisted coding actually making it harder?
Man, I'm gonna take the I don't know, say the over or the under. I'm gonna take the look. I've already said this. I think it's gonna be K-shaped. I think that for the people that are good at this job, they are just gonna crush it.
Be really good.
And,
Yeah. So
and the people
you're
that
you're
are
agreeing
weak,
with me.
and the people that are weak are going to get crushed.
Yeah.
So here's a quick story. Like one of the teams I'm working with, like first time ever, halfway through the sprint, one of the engineers is like, "Fuck this, let's ship tomorrow." Like they're like, "Let's start." Like we got so much shit done in the first half of the sprint. Let's like ship now, you
Mhm.
know. And it's this sense. It's when you said swashbuckler, that's kind of what I'm hearing there. Like I've got another team that I work with where, this one of the team of one engineer is just like crushing it, and he's like, hey, like I'm getting stuff done in an hour of what would have taken me a week before.
Well, it's interesting. When I said swashbuckler, there was an assumption in that statement that maybe I have wrong.
Oh,
My
say it.
assumption So what my assumption was that engineers are choosing to use AI for some things, meaning use an agent to write some things, and choosing to write it themselves for other things. And where the swashbucklerness came in there was saying, well, I'm going to go see if the agent can do this one instead
No,
of me. But
no.
but you're saying 100% agent.
100% of the code is being my top engineers, they are no longer writing code. 100% of the lines of code that are being checked in by my top engineers are not written by the developers. It is being managed and evaluated by the developers.
Yeah.
Like I, 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 I defy anyone to tell me otherwise. I'm if you're still typing brackets and fors and ifs, and you are getting left behind.
Mm. So this raises an interesting question that came up this week at my company. I have just for some context, I have a weekly engineering roundtable that I host. And what that means is it started out as an office hours, the idea where people could come and ask me questions or whatever, but that didn't really ever work very well. So, I mean, sometimes somebody would come and sometimes they'd have a question, but lots of times they just wanted to hear what other people were going to ask. And so I changed it up a little bit and said, okay, we're just going to have this meeting and anybody can bring a topic, or I'm going to try to come with a topic or two every week, and I'm just going to throw it out there, and we'll just discuss. There's no, we're not trying to accomplish anything. We're just discuss. And one of the topics that was discussed this week, it's every Tuesday, it was discussed this week, was in a world where the agents are writing most of the code, does the quality of the code matter? Like, it doesn't matter if it's a big ball of mud. If the agent knows how to change the ball of mud, I mean, the reason we don't like it to be a ball of mud, I was more on the side of that it doesn't matter. I think it does matter, but I was more on the side that it doesn't matter because I was like, look, most of the reason we don't like spaghetti code is because it's difficult to change and difficult to understand. But if the robot can understand it and can change it, then what's it matter if it's
Yeah,
messy? And we don't like it because when we want to make big changes to it, it's really difficult. But if the robot can make big changes to it, like
yeah,
it's just still one prompt for us or whatever, figuratively speaking. And so doesn't matter. This was intense debate, by the way, and I think maybe you're. I took the it doesn't matter. It sounds like you're taking the it matters.
yeah. I'm on the it matters, and I'm on the it matters for two reasons. The first simple reason is that as I just proclaimed that the top of the K are going to be all the people that are really good at evaluating quality and evaluating
Right.
work
Right.
product. And so it's still human beings that are accountable for the code quality. I am confident that the answer is it's all about how quickly you can evaluate the content. So it does matter that it's be readable by you, the evaluator, right?
Mhm.
So that's reason number one. And reason number two, I think that in 2026, even I suspect between now and 2028, like, no. the robots aren't good at reading the big ball of mud, and they aren't good at the bigger projects. It's not they're like all of our data is showing that we're starting to kind of peak out right now. Like we've hit a plateau in sort of like frontier model performance. And it's still quite good, but it's kind of plateauing right now. And I'm not seeing like a major breakthrough on the horizon. So what that means is you've got something that's really quite good at writing things very quickly. And now it all comes down to how quickly you can evaluate it. So I'm going to say code quality matters.
Okay, so as I said a minute ago, just for the record, I'm not fully in team. It doesn't matter, but
That's
theoretically, I'd
you're just
entertain
is
the
that your
idea.
way of saying uncle?
No, no, no. I'm just saying I want to be clear, but I do want to push harder. I do want to push
Yeah.
harder against team. It does matter with this. Imagine theoretically, you've got perfect and complete test automation. Does it matter?
If the code is quality, if the test
Yeah,
automation catches it.
yeah.
Um, well, I mean, uh, I've also asked the AI to go write tests for me,
Mm,
and I love that it can do that, and it often does. But guess what? You better code review those tests
for
because
sure.
I've had the AI write tests that basically passed and tested the exact opposite thing that it was supposed to do. It's like it's a little bit like I mean that. But by the way, you see that with human engineers too, right? Like, oh, I couldn't get the test to work, so I changed the test. When you look at it, what you changed the test to actually be passing the fail case, not the not.
You're reminding me of this war story moment that happened a few years ago where I was looking at some code. It was about 5 years ago. I was looking at some code that had been written long before I arrived. This wasn't even at the company I'm at now. It was prior company. I was looking at this code that was there, and I'm just staring at it, and it's supposed to be doing one thing, and I'm like, I just think this is doing exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing. And I asked another we were still I asked another person to come look at it, and I was like, could you just look at this? Like, I just think this is 100% backwards. And they were like, yeah, that's what's happening. And I was like, how did code has been here for years, and it's literally been like doing minus when it should be doing plus. I mean, like, that was how simple it was, right? And I was like, how did nobody notice this? And how did test pass, how did this whole thing get through?
And what was the answer?
Who knows? But I just remember staring at it. I remember not being able to
There were
believe my
tests.
eye.
There were tests, and it was
There
passing the test. The tests
uh,
were exactly wrong.
yeah, probably. I just remember staring at the code and just like not believing my own eyes, just being like, that can't be the way it is, right?
I I
Anyway.
will say like I do think I you notice that I said, look, you got to have, good engineering practices that would be good for your humans as well,
Hmm.
and then let the
Hmm.
bots live in that space. And I listed linting and type checking and I will say that, I Paul Brown, one of the guests on our podcast recently, he and I were talking about this months ago, and he was kind of like, who cares about lint? Why do you care about lint? If the bot is able to write the code without lint, then what do you care? Like, and so I think it's fair that there's going to be a valid debate that's going to happen. I'm currently standing on the ground pretty firmly. I feel pretty confident. It's what uh, I guess I'm going to say this is a strong opinion, loosely held, and then
Hmm.
if you can show me some data, then I'd be happy to change my mind on this. But I think that it all comes down to evaluation of the code that's being written, and so we need to stack the deck in our favor as the human evaluators
Yeah,
um, to evaluate.
every way we can. Readability is one of those pieces. All of it is all of it. They're all parts of it.
By the way, my 2.9 billion tokens doesn't include all of the Copilot code review requests that I click on. So now on, like all the teams I work on, it's like it's very clear that our practice is, uh, you know, whoever writes the code, whether they use an agent to write it or they
Hmm.
clickety
Hmm.
clack the keyboard themselves. The very first thing that happens is everybody clicks code review by Copilot, and then I can't count that like the you know engineers that I know that would have written the code that way, written the code as best they could have, Copilot comes back and gives them feedback, and they're like, "Oh, that is actually a good thing. Let me consider that. Let me go change that code." And so before we even have a human code review it, it's like I won't even look at code that hasn't had Copilot look at it. Now, and then I will go look at the Copilot comments and see like, well, were those valid things? Did the engineer make those changes? And that gives me a sense of like that's another piece of evaluating code quality, right? Like if the original implementation had a lot of sort of fundamental errors that were caught by the AI code review agent, I'm going to pay more close attention to the final product.
I want to add one thing to this. We're talking about the ability to evaluate. We're talking about the intern, the eager intern, and all these different, tech lead, all these different practices. I'll throw one more little practice tactic into the sauce. Small PRs.
Yeah.
I bet the agents are inclined. You can let the agent make large PRs.
Yep.
But we know, I'm sure there's science behind this, but I just know it from working with people. If your PR is more than 300 lines, it's hard for somebody to reason about what the heck's going on there. When I see those PRs that are 68 files and thousands of lines, I'm like, this
No.
is forget this, right?
Yeah, totally. Well,
Um,
there's two things about that. First of all, let me say, spiritually, I'm 100% aligned with what you just said. Agree 100%. And I am also a big fan of the 300 lines benchmark as a reasonable thing. I will say that I have adjusted my mindset around that, where it's 300 lines of functional code. And
mhm,
if that 300 lines of functional code includes, 1,500 lines of new tests written in
mhm.
the PR, I still consider that to be passing. But you're right that I just got done saying how important it is to code review the tests. So
Yeah, yeah. Team it matters needs you to code review the test.
yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. But by the way, I just want to say with one last point about your small
Please.
PRs. Another good friend of mine who's like, he's not a software developer, but he's an engineering mindset, and he's been working on a project, two guys in a garage type thing, and his co-founder was like ranting to him like, you can't give me these 3,000 line PRs, and he's like, I don't know why not. And I was like, tell me what was in that 3,000 line PR, and it's like, oh yeah, I kept asking the agent for more and more and more and more and more. And I was like, okay, that was your mistake. Like,
Mhm,
you
mhm,
can't ask your co-founder to code review something that has 12 concepts in it. That was your original sin.
mhm.
So there you go.
Brad, it is a crazy new world.
Yep.
It's tectonic.
Yep.
It is in my entire career has been one way. If I think about the major changes in my career, which I'm not going to collect every one of them up here, but NoSQL databases were a huge change. Cloud was a huge change. Um,
The internet.
I well, the internet, yeah, I kind of started on the internet. I didn't really do pre-internet software. Um, this just feels bigger than all of them.
I
It
agree.
just feels bigger.
I agree.
It's changing the craft.
I agree. I agree.
It's crazy. It's blowing my mind.
Well, there you go. 2026 K-shaped economy for AI coding.
All right. Well, smash, rate, review, subscribe, do all that stuff, my friends.
Yeah.
And Brad, we'll see you here next week.
See you here next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at How Many CTOs Pod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at howmanyctospod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.